Good morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle, Similkameen-syilx, Weaving a Path to Health and Wellbeing with Wendy Hawkes. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We'd like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Please feel free to introduce yourselves and the nation you're calling in from in the chat box. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarain Squawkin. I'm the Learning Circle Manager. I'm Similkameen-syilx on my mom's side and Hickory Apache and Belgian on my father's side. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion, and joining us working behind the scenes is Cynthia, our production coordinator. She'll be in the background interacting with everyone in the chat. Finally, before we get into today's discussion, I'll provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be sensitive or emotionally triggering. Please make sure that you're looking after yourself, and if at any point in time you feel that you need to talk to an elder, counselor, or family member, don't hesitate to do so. We have some prompts in the chat, and if you need additional support. Now I'll turn it over to Auntie Wendy to introduce herself.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Wendy. I go by Winnie to my friends and family, and I'm happy to be here today. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Ashnola Valley in the Similkameen. It's not as beautiful today as it was a month ago. We had a very severe fire. And I worry about the land and water and the animals. So I know Creator will look after them and bring them back. But I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up with a video that we recorded of me and Cynthia going to the Similkameen with Auntie Wendy and gathering materials for the weaving that Auntie Wendy did for us. So we'll start that now.
Soha isqueezed sisiatku in klahap intum Eleanor Squawkin isqueezed twi Eleanor Squawkin isqueezed nath Robert Whitney. And hello, good day. My name is Wendy. My friends call me Winnie. You can call me Winnie too. My parents and grandparents come from the Similkameen, and as well as Penticton and Pimpkin. And today we're here at Ginty's Pond, and we're going to be harvesting some cattails and some tulies, hopefully. We've been watching the land, and the bioindicators are telling us that these plants are ready to harvest for basket making. But one of the reasons we wait till about now to come out and harvest is first of all, the plants have grown up enough. They haven't gone to the stage where they're beginning to produce the little hot dog thing, the seed head.
Oh yeah.
They haven't gotten to that stage. If they were beginning to do it though, and I see the odd one here and there, when they're green, that's edible too.
Oh.
Yeah, cook it just like corn. But we come out here because they're so busy getting ready to produce those things. They're making themselves super strong, and that's going to help us. I actually prefer to work with cattail. I like both, but I prefer to work with cattail. It's amazingly strong. I wasn't wearing it today, but I made a little pouch for my cell phone last winter, and I split several of the cattails to make it, so I made them quite narrow, just to see how strong is it, how long will it last. And I made cordage out of the wings on the cattail leaves, the whole works, and it just last week started getting weak on one side.
Oh, wow.
But I got hung up on something and pulled away. So I actually pulled on it really hard on accident, but I pulled nonetheless. So anyway, at least a hand's width above the water line. The reason for that is it's going to, for the rest of the summer, it's going to go down, down, down. And in that time, this will recover. If for any reason it doesn't, it actually grows. It grows on a long rhizome, so it has this long root that kind of goes into the ground and then makes an L, and lots of shoots off of it. If you were harvesting that, you could eat it, peel it and eat it.
Oh.
Or people also, and this is another thing I want to try, would pound that into a flour and leach it in water to make all the flour settle out, evaporate the water, and that was one of our flours used to thicken our foods, make our soups and our stews.
Wow.
Even fry bread. So you'll see, cattails in particular, they have layers and layers of leaves. The outer layers have wings on them. This is the part of the plant that I use to make cordage.
Cordage?
Yeah. Just like we use our spitzen to make our cord and our rope,
okay.
You can do the same thing with this part of the cattail. So these I can't use green, but when I get home, I'll separate them. Wherever there are any wings, if I can peel it, it's practically translucent in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
I'll peel it and set that aside, let it dry. And the rest of the stalk can be used. If I want to make the strongest baskets, though, I'm working with the inner stalks.
Oh, okay.
So
that's more of the newer stuff, right?
it's for some reason, the cell structure itself is different. So this green that you see will be deeper and further down the stalk.
Oh, okay.
Where the outside leaves, they were first to come along. I won't waste them, for sure, I'll use them. One of the other things a lot of people don't know, this is an antiseptic. Do you see the shiny juice that comes from the plant? That's got antibiotic, antiseptic properties.
Wow.
And there's only so much of the leaves that'll give that off. But when I get home, it's easier if I do it there because they're tightly bound now.
Yep.
And then I'll just set them down, make a good pile, and then come back and bring them up and then bundle them.
About a hand width apart. Put about there.
If you should see
Water
any critters, frogs, salamanders, anything like that, it's good to know because these are the kind of animals that we're protecting and we're looking out for. There's too many of them they're going away from us, and if we don't say where we find these things when we're on the land, we can't protect them. When I get them home, I'll separate the leaves out and lay them out. I have drying racks, and I'll lay them out so that they can dry a bit. Once they've dried for a few days, I can bundle them up. Because I'll bundle them to take them home, but I'll bundle them up again, stand them up, and put them in a hopefully a dark place, which is this. I have a sea can at home. I also have a tool shed if it's fairly dark to get them out of the immediate sun. I want them to retain the green color as long as possible. And when we get home, I'll show you the difference between some that were out and some that were in. There's a big difference, you'll see it. If there's a message that I want anyone to hear about this harvesting and these practices, it's that these places are the places that clean our water. And without water, none of us can live. No organism on this earth can be alive in any way, shape, or form. And so we have to take care of these places. All these wetlands, they're the places disappearing the fastest across the earth, the entire earth. So it's not just about basket making, it's about looking after it. And by us coming in and taking some of these plants, we're opening up some of the water, allowing a little bit more of a flow, allowing the animals to get in easier. Otherwise it gets so thick, chokes everything out and nothing grows. From what my teachers have shared with me, you're always doing it before you're getting those little hot dog things, the actual flower. Partly because the leaf itself has, the structure is it's more like insulated properties. If you were to feel and pinch that, you'd feel it kind of cave in a bit. There's fibers in there that are just like insulation, and it's amazing. The plant cell structure is long and skinny, and it links together just like a tree, and it's incredibly strong. So when you look at a tule on the inside, this looks just like the styrofoam insulation that we use to pack things and so on. And this is why this plant's really important for our people. We used to use this for our homes. We could make furniture out of it, chairs to sit on, mattresses. You feel how puffy it is, and it stays puffy like that even after it's been dried and reconstituted again. And that's the insulating properties of that plant. When we would make our tule mat houses, we made them anyway, but I think once we were curtailed to reservation lands and couldn't leave, you couldn't travel to see relatives down in Montana to go get bison and bison hides. Our people had bison hides and they traded for them. And we traded our salmon, we traded our hussam. We made fantastic rope and other things that we traded. Our ochre was considered one of the most valuable resources there is. And even the fur traders remarked on how a small little round ball of our precious ochre would be traded for a stack high of furs, the same value that they would give a gun in the old days, because that was so valuable. So we'd use those things. We didn't always have to make tule mat lodges, but Creator always provides, and Creator gave us tules to help keep the people warm, give them shelter. So,
Is Tulameen ochre in our language?
it's an anglicized version of zootmeen, which is tulameen. That's the red ochre, and that's what it means, is that red paint. While there are stripes of the red ochre going through the bluffs, there's also white, black, orange, brown. So you've got all four colors of the medicine wheel, but you've also got other shades. I was blessed one year, probably 15 years ago, maybe more, 20, to be given a chance to paint a canvas teepee lodge with ochre. It took me 2 weeks, but I painted it, and they had it up in Headley. They had it on display in front of the Mascot Gold Mine tours when it was running. And I put specific designs on there for a reason, and using all the different shades of ochre, and I was able to accomplish shading on the horses, the shape of their bodies, and fading in and fading, making it darker, lighter. It was amazing to work with. And I've never had a chance to do it again, but I have worked on some materials at home, made some kerchiefs and a few bags. I even used it for my sister when she's preparing food for ceremony. I said, here's an apron for you to wear, because it's medicine, right?
Yeah.
And it's for our healing and for our protection. And people that prepare food for ceremony are blessed 10 times over just for what they're providing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's about the Similkameen and the tuktan.
Tuktan. I like that.
When I first started making baskets with these, I was just flattening them out. So they get dry, you reconstitute, and then you flatten them out like that. You can run it over a stick or something to do that. And then I started talking with Herman Edward, and Herman and I discussed how twisting them might actually make it stronger. And so that one basket I shared with you earlier, that was all twisted, every piece there, except for the spokes or the base pieces that I wove around. But because this area has been hammered so hard by different pollutants and things coming down the valley, these baskets that I make from these or other implements that might be used, I won't use to serve any food or to have food stored in it.
That's because of the pollutants, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, our skin soaks up pollutants. It soaks up lotion when we rub it on. It soaks up anything we put on our skin.
Yeah.
You soak in an Epsom's bath, you're going to soak up those minerals.
Yeah.
So it's only makes sense that these other things are going to soak it up too, and they could, in the uptake of the plant taking those things on while they're cleaning the water, it could be something that would be harmful for us later. So I don't want to take that chance, not knowing for sure. And I can tell you there's not a lot of scientific study around the uptake of pollutants on native species and significant plants for native. When we get home, I'll show you the difference. But before we go, let's see, where there's seeds, we want to give those back. Because I wanted the beauty of the stitch itself to show through.
Yeah.
I wanted the different weaves and the pattern changes to show through. But this actually has meaning for me.
Mm-hmm.
These are called earth lines when you see those straight lines like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, especially because I live here and look at Crater all the time where all the snow accumulates, that's the snow on the mountain tops, and as it comes down the mountains, it becomes the lifeblood of the valley.
Oh.
And that's the meaning of that to me, and that's why I incorporated that. I figured I would use it as a harvesting basket, so you can see the different types of birch are paper birch and water birch.
This one water birch?
These are actually both paper birch. The difference is the way it was peeled, because the birch has several layers. In this case, I was able to get those layers because the person had a tree threatening a power line. They had to take it down, and it happened to be at the right time of the year. And I said, hey, well, since you booked that up for firewood, can I peel the bark? And they said yes, so I did. I was able, you see how thick this is.
This one's
That's like leather.
Too?
That's the same tree, but it hasn't been split.
Wow.
It's as thick as from
This is
the
your
outside
phone?
into.
For your phone?
It is, yeah. I just didn't put a strap on it. The one I was using is hanging up over there. I'll grab that in a moment.
Cool.
But just experimenting with these different materials that we use. This is just tule, and then I used a little bit of white. It's called butcher's cord. It's
Butcher's cord?
They use it to wrap your meat.
Oh, okay.
It didn't have meat on it, but I had it in my cupboard, and I was like, let me try that.
That's cool. I don't know what it is.
This reminds me of a cedar root basket, but it's not. It's simply split. I want to say this was the cattail.
What was this one again?
This was a combination of cattail and juncus grass. Juncus grass is like a tule, but very small. This used to grow all over the place here, and now there's only found in a few places.
Oh wow.
I didn't even harvest that here. Had to go down into another area completely. I was in the States.
Wow.
To harvest that. There's the only place I've ever seen it growing in any quantity, and it's even there, it's not a lot, is on the place they call Sickle Point. So when I worked for PIB, I had the pleasure of going down there and doing restoration work. More paper birch and cedar root. Pine needle. Everybody loves pine needle.
That's what this one is too, right?
It's just a smaller version, so big, medium, small.
How'd you get the blue?
I dyed them. So I have a beautiful tree out here that grows really long needles, and longer than most. And I think that's why Creator had me plant here, put my camp here.
This is a cool stitch pattern.
And anyway, I wait till they fall in the ground, rake them up. You can tell if they're this year's needles because they're not really deep rust colored. They're nice kind of tan color. Pick them up, pull the caps off of them, and then put them in a pot. Wash them off first, put them in a pot. Then put them in with some dye. I've tried natural dyes. It takes a lot longer to use natural dyes, but it does work. Like our Oregon grapefruit makes a beautiful golden yellow.
Wow.
There's a few other types of plant and roots that grow that also make other colors. And I haven't tried any of our earth paints. And then I've also used synthetic dyes like Rit dye. This is water birch, this is paper birch.
What's the difference?
The water birch, number one, is more rare.
Yeah.
So I don't actually, this was one of the first birch baskets I ever made, but I don't actually go out and look for a stand. Child said that there are very few healthy stands of water birch left, so I don't bother it. This came from a tree that had fallen over, and so I went and asked the tree for its bark. It was the wrong time of the year. It wasn't easy to do. It was hard to peel. It was nothing that was the way we would do it normally, was the way it should have been, but I couldn't see it going to waste on a beautiful tree like that. And so the water birch is, if you feel it, it's super hard, it's stiff, it's thick. It's got this beautiful red color though. And then inside, olive plant. It looks different even. The outer bark has that kind of a golden rust color.
Yeah.
Where paper birch is usually a white color.
This hat's made out of tule, right?
That is it's mostly tule with a few strands of cattail. I was trying to, I have no elders left. I have one auntie that's still alive. And I don't have any teachers, so some of the stuff I've had to figure out on my own or remember from what my mom told me with the birch harvesting. I asked her, Mom, did you ever harvest before the birch? Have you ever done these things? And she said, no, but I watched her grandma do it. And I was like, my grandma, which is really her grandma, it would be my great grandma, Matilda. And she told me how she did it. And based on what she told me, I went out and was able to harvest without harming the tree. That's how well she related it to me. And that comes from the language, how it's passed down. It doesn't get changed. It stays true to the meaning. So, and my mom, she's in this picture with us, me and my sisters. She taught me everything I know pretty much. My Auntie Irene is the one that introduced me to the basket weaving. But even my mom, she, everything she could recall she would share. And even if she didn't do it herself, she said, "I didn't do it, but your grandma did, and I saw what she did. This is when she did it. This is how she did it. This is what she did." And always it came with that prayer. Always it came with that offering. And my mom was a residential school survivor. She had a horrific experience. And she chose to raise us away from this place. In some ways, that's divided us from the community. In other ways, it's also, we've been embraced by other community. So some of these baskets have been around for a while. This one I gathered, and there's medicines in here all through this basket. I went up on Tuskegee, that mountain behind us, when we were out there collecting today. And so within there, there's all those branches are incorporated into it. We were talking about the National Park Reserve at the time, and Tuskegee is a big part of that area, and it's an important area for our people, an important place for gathering, medicines, you name it. So we went up there and looked for them, looked to see what's still there, what's still viable, where can we, help it, encourage it. This is the little phone basket.
Wow.
So you feel that. I've been beating that thing up, and I finally got it loose because I got hung up on a chair, and you know how something sticks in, and I walked away and it stayed. So that's why it got weak there, because I really gave it a good
tug.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But I mean, people go, "Wow, that's kind of cool." I go, "Feel it. It is strong."
Yeah.
It's just insanely strong.
That's pretty. That's cool.
Yeah.
Can we see the dried up ones compared to the?
Yes, they're out on the front deck.
Okay.
You can see how lovely they are, how unblemished they are. So those would be the ones that I really want to do something extra special and pretty with. The others I'll use for my plant baskets or whatnot. On Mother's Day, I worked really hard to get 5 baskets made so I could give one each to my sisters and my mother.
And this one is the tule, right?
This is the tule, yes.
What do you say in the language again?
Tuktan.
Tuktan.
Tuktan. Sometimes there's cattail mixed in, but not this time. Because like I said, when I'm weaving, I don't know what it is, but it gives me time to reflect, to meditate, to pray. And people come into my mind or my heart, and I think about them, and I know that basket is for that person. I know that's where it belongs. So, there you go.
Wow. It's so great seeing that again. It's like we're out there doing that again.
I know. It really just made my heart swell.
Yeah. I know one of the things you mentioned in the film was that Auntie Irene was one of the first people to show you who inspired you to pick it up, the weaving and whatnot. Like, was there anyone that inspired you, or was it kind of just like
I had been interested in weaving pine needle baskets. My sister Dee Dee actually was learning to do pine needle baskets, and I'd come home for a visit, and this was many years ago, and she was showing me the basket she was working on, and I was so impressed by it, and I loved the smell of it, and I touched it, and it poked me here and there, and just getting a feel for it. So I became interested, and it just so happened the house I lived in, where I was staying in California at the time, had pine needles on it that were probably anywhere from 1.5 to 2 feet long.
I don't know which species of pine it was, but again, Creator planted me where Creator wanted me. And then just down the block from where I live, because I was in an urban area, was the only undeveloped section of that entire town. And in the middle of it was a wetland, and there was the Otay River basin that would eventually flood and go into that area. So there were tulies and cattails growing there all the time. There were ducks that would migrate every year and come, and I'd go out there I bought food for them, and I'd walk my dog out there. And those plants were there all the time. So when Auntie Irene came to visit for a couple of weeks, the kids came home with a bucket of crawdads that they got in that place, and they were showing her, and she said, "Oh, I noticed you have all those beautiful plants out there. Why aren't you weaving?" And I said, "Auntie, I don't know how." She said, so she told the kids to go and harvest. She told them how to do that, and take the crawdads back, put them back in the water, and they returned with some of the material. And she said, "Okay, we're going to let this dry for a few days. It's not ideal, but I'm going to show you how to do this." And that was the beginning. She had stayed for a couple of weeks that time. And I kept, of course, once she left, I fumbled through things, and but kept trying and never gave up. Uh, I became a lot better at doing the pine needle baskets. It was uh, easier, but that was the beginning of everything, is that visit with Auntie Irene.
Wow, that's so cool. Like, it's cool that you were like meant to like be a weaver, like just from where you were staying, and that Auntie Irene gave you kind of that push to like get going and start your journey with the weaving, and that's really cool. Did she teach you other things? Like, I know you mentioned also in the film that you engage in a lot of self-reflection and prayer. Like, did she tell you that, or was that kind of something you picked up on your own?
No, I was raised harvesting on the land, and Mom would take us out all the time. And anytime we were on the land and harvesting any type of plant or medicine, we were taught to make our offering and say our prayer and introduce ourselves. There's a proper and respectful way to go about harvesting, not just when it's time to pick it, but also through the process. So if we were making medicine, that there is that prayer involved, there is that offering involved, giving thanks and letting the plant know who you are and what you're planning to do when you actually make the medicine, saying those prayers if it's for yourself or someone else, and making sure all are taken care of right through to when you're finished with it, being respectful and returning it to the land in a proper way. So that's something that I know I grew up with, and there are still many people who are taught these same things. It's what I'm teaching my grandchildren. If we don't respect all of these other plants as living beings and organisms for the life that they're giving us, then how are we going to know to take care of them? How are we going to be able to look after them and notice if they become sick or ill? And continue to practice and exercise what we call title and rights, which is really our responsibility and obligation to the land. There's also ties to our language and what's embedded within our language. For example, I learned when I returned home permanently almost 25 years ago now, that the word seal, what we call ourselves, actually has a real meaning that's embedded in it. And for example, the yil, that part of the word, that it denotes an image of something twisting and twisting together to become stronger. So, for example, when we make our cordage, our spitzen, it's these long fibers and they're thin, and on their own, they're weak. They'll break if you tug on them. But when you twist them together and bind them, they become stronger. And so that's what our people should be doing. That's what we should be doing as human beings. But it's not just humans, it's also with the land. And our leaders are called Yilmijo. Yil. They're supposed to bring and bind and strengthen the people. So when you hear that, and you hear that at the end of the word, that X makes a sound. That X is a command. That means that word is a command. So we as Syilx people are commanded to bind together to be stronger. I spoke with my sister the week we were evacuated because of the fires. My sister Dee Dee put us up in Chuchuiha, up at Headley. And when we left, I didn't take all my baskets with me. I took the ones that I knew that were already going to someone else. I knew where they belonged, they just haven't been gifted yet. And I just happened to be looking at the basket I did with the materials we gathered that day. I happened to be looking right at it, and I was thinking about what I was trying to express with it in the design. And I related this to you earlier about how the weave going in and out with arms, linking together, people holding together, forming that circle around, and in doing so, strengthening one another, showing love for one another. It just so happened to be a few feet away from a basket that my great-grandmother, your great-great-grandmother did out of cedar root. It's a beautiful cedar root basket. It's one of the few surviving baskets that she made. And it's just incredible. It's a big picking basket. And I saw that basket a few feet from this basket. And I had this epiphany. And that epiphany was that, number one, both baskets are beautiful, like our people, like the land, like the water. They're beautiful. But the other epiphany I had was how tightly woven her cedar root basket was. This is my little wee attempt at a cedar root basket. Mm-hmm. But it's so tightly woven that I can fill it with water and it won't drip. And hers was so tightly woven, and that made me think about our people as they were then and as they are today. The comparison between the two baskets told me that we have, as people today, a long way to go. So our people were more tightly bound together, were more unified, and supported one another more than they do today. So we have a lot of work. Today, we're still beautiful, we're still strong, but we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen in our communities.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can totally relate to that, and I understand that it's not going to be just like that. It's going to be like a long journey, and like you mentioned that you started weaving like when Auntie Irene showed you, and that was a while ago, and that it really taught you a lot, and it's kind of helping, just from what I'm hearing from you, helping you kind of self-reflect and engage in like meditation and whatnot, and like prayer, and yeah, that's really amazing. And you say that usually when you're making a basket, like sometimes a person in mind or someone comes to mind when you're making it. How do you know that? Do you like, is it like some sort of feeling, or is it just something that person's on your mind, or like how do you usually know which basket goes to someone?
I don't usually know in the beginning. It becomes apparent as I'm working. Um, I have in my travels, I've come across different people, and I have visited many different places. Some of our family is spread out all the way down to California, and in my travels and my visits and meeting new people and seeing old people that I've known forever, uh, just conversations come up and you think about them. If they're struggling, you want to say prayers for them. You feel a need to do that. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or not, but I know I've been doing this for a long time. And it's a way for me to also figure things out. A lot of people don't know this, but 25 years ago or so, when I first returned home permanently, I was living in California. I was very involved with the Native community there. And I was approached by a sweat leader to lead a sweat for some children who were preparing to be head girl and boy dancer for a powwow locally. And they wanted me to lead their sweat. And I just said, oh my goodness, I've never led a sweat. I've been in sweat, but I've never led a sweat. I've not been trained to lead a sweat. I didn't know what to do. And so I sat down and I had reached out to Uncle Glenn. Glenn Douglas is one of my uncles. I reached out to Uncle Charlie Squaffin. I reached out to my mom. I reached out to other aunties. I could not get a hold of anyone that day. Everybody I tried to reach out to said, whoever was home said, oh no, they're on the road. They went over here. They're doing this. And at that time, people didn't have cell phones. You just had to wait until they returned home and got your message. But that day I thought, well, I can't be in a sweat myself right now for the answer. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to pray and meditate about it. And I think I'll begin to weave a basket for them just in case, because I was taught in our teaching that men and women don't mix sweat. And we're talking about a head boy and a head girl dancer being in the same sweat. So that was against the protocols I was given in my teachings. Maybe not for them, but for us. And so I had to pray about it. And I sat down to weave a pine needle basket to gift to them with cedar from our country for their sweat. In the event I could not do that for them, that I would still be with them in some capacity in that manner. And as I wove that basket, the answers were given to me. But more importantly, they were actually, the message that was given to me was that there was a gift. And that was a hand being held open like this with nothing in it, nothing you could see or touch. But that was the gift. It was knowledge. It was something that you would always be able to keep with you. That was always a part of you to begin with, part of who we are as human beings on this planet. And so I did get my answer, and my answer was yes, I would be able to lead that sweat, and that I would be returning home. So after a 20-year career in banking and living in California for all of that time, I had this epiphany that I needed to come home to receive that gift. And things just came together. 2 weeks later, my truck was packed. my resignation had already been submitted. My family was supporting me, who were still in the South, and I came home. And that's when my real learning journey began.
Oh,
Kind of crazy, but here I am today.
that's so cool. I'm so happy that you made your journey home, because then I got to have some time with you and got to connect with you, and you got to share your teachings with me, and I really appreciated that. Do you have so you mentioned Auntie Irene was one of your mentors with like teaching you how to make baskets. Do you have any mentees that work under you, or do you have any people that you work with to show how to make baskets within your network or community?
Oh, I started out sharing with my next door neighbor as I was working. She came to the door one day and I was working on a basket, and you get to some places in the basket and you can't let go. So I'm holding on to the basket so it won't come loose. And she comes to the door and she's, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I would love it if you teach me. So I taught her, and she's the mother of one of our children. So eventually she will teach that child. And I just, I taught her and she was really good at it. That was my first person. Her name was Crystal. And she's not my neighbor anymore. She's since moved away, but very beautiful young woman and very inquisitive, and just the desire to learn was there. Then as time went on and I started having grandchildren, I started teaching my grandchildren everything that was taught to me so that I could hand that down. My grandchildren are actually pretty good little weavers. And they went with me this year to go gather cattails and tules, and they've helped me gather other plants and medicines and berries, and we've taken some of their classmates from their natives program at their school out on the land to begin teaching. In the native program at the grade school and the middle school, we talk about more than just weaving. We talk about how incredibly ingenious Indigenous people are in connecting to the land, and not just noticing, but really connecting to the land and seeing how the different plants behave and react. I know in our teachings that many of the teachings we have were also given to us in dreams. And so I tell them, pay attention to your dreams. When we do these things, you may be given messages, you may be given answers. But when we talked about even the cordage, making the cordage, and we sat down and we began doing some projects in the class. And so I showed the kids a video of an Indigenous community in South America who were rebuilding a bridge that they literally wove to. It was a woven bridge crossing this huge ravine over a river. And the kids are watching the video and they're watching everyone participate, and the cordage turned into rope and the rope turned into bigger rope, and that bigger rope wound together, and everything from start to finish. And they were pretty amazed because it was big enough for people, their carts and their llamas to cross, loaded. But one of the boys said, I don't know, I think I'd be afraid to cross that bridge. What if it breaks? And I said, hun, they're replacing a bridge that they made 500 years before. And so this is and I said, then I took out a piece of the Spitzen cordage that I had just recently twined, and it was this thick. It's not very thick. I took it out and I said, you go on that side, you go on that side, each one of you pull it and see if you can break it. Have a tug of war. And they pulled and they pulled and they pulled. And then another boy joined. And it wasn't until the third boy joined that they were able to break this tiny little cordage. So after that, the kids said, wow, our people really are smart. I said, of course they are. They're brilliant. I said, think about how they knew these plants were so strong. And you could just see them light up. You could see the pride, and you could see that they were connecting to the plants. They were connecting to the indigenous science that's part of it. They were connecting to the botany. They were connecting to the medicines. They were all of the things that are part of those plants.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do have a couple of groups of young people that I've kind of taken under my wing. When I visit with my grandchildren, I volunteer and spend a day with the grade school and a day with the middle school. Next year, I'll also be at the high school. And I've been asked to, in addition to helping with those things, perhaps help the high school start their very first powwow drum, which I think
Wow.
would be awesome.
Yeah. I remember you and Corey used to have a powwow drum.
Yes. And it was called Nkwanim.
Mm-hmm.
And we traveled all over the South into Nevada and Arizona, Southern California. And it was an intertribal group of all women singers.
So cool. I remember when we were little kids just hearing you guys sing, and then I think my favorite was like the Mighty Mouse song.
Yes.
That's what I remember the most.
Well, Brianna, your cousin, says, no, Auntie, I like Scooby-Doo the best.
Yeah. Scooby-Doo was a good one too, but
Mhm.
I always liked Mighty Mouse. Just like how much energy went into that one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like,
oh
so
yeah.
those are some of the people. I've been able to also work with the youth here at Lower Similkameen. I've been honored to be asked to teach for some of the youth as well as the families at the last family gathering. And there were three, actually four people that really stood out. And I was like, oh, I hope they come back. I hope we get together again, because you can tell weaving is not for everyone.
Mhm.
Weaving is there's some people, it really suits them.
Mhm.
And that meditative prayer process that is part of it,
Mhm.
they get it, and they are calmed by it. They are they when they're making their basket, they say, oh, this, for some reason I'm thinking about so and so. And I encourage them to make two. I always try to set them up with more than one kit, so that if their first basket can be that gift, because that's how we're taught, your first basket should
Mhm.
be a gift. And then the second is for you.
Yeah.
And so often they will be thinking about, who will I gift this to? And that person will come to them. And I tell them, when you're making your stitches, when you're making those coils, it's okay in your mind or even out loud, however you want to do it. Make prayers for them. Put good thoughts, put good energy into those things.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And like that kind of gets me thinking, like, what was your most meaningful project? Like which one kind of sparks your brain into like the one that like brought you the most joy and whatnot?
I would say it's kind of tough to, to think about, because so many of them now have gone to live with the people they were meant for. And without looking at them, um, it's hard to say, but one comes to mind first. And it was after my mom had passed away. My mom did not want to be buried. She wanted to be cremated. After Kamloops Residential School and being locked in closets and whatever. So this was hard. She didn't want to be buried. She was afraid of being put in a box. So she wanted to be cremated. She wanted her ashes taken to a particular place in Southern California where she raised us, away from Kamloops, away from the possibility of being put in residential school. And it just happens to be the most southwest town there is in the United States. Mexico's just a short walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, that's where Mom wanted her ashes taken. She was very insistent that we do things a specific way. And if we didn't listen, she's going to come back and haunt us. But it was really important to us to honor her wishes. And so we did as we were asked. And that meant driving down to California. And I thought I was a strong person, but it turns out I'm not as strong as I thought I was. And Chief Charlotte Mitchell stepped up and said, I will drive you. So she drove myself and my siblings, and we picked up my brother along the way. She took us all the way to where we needed to go, and she brought us home safely. And for me, that basket, it was a birch basket. It wasn't the first one, but it's certainly probably one that I consider one of my best. It was gifted to her, filled with huckleberries, to say thank you for the wonderful things she did for us. So, sorry. It was a hard time. But I'm ever so grateful for what she did. There aren't too many people that would drive 1,500 miles with a bunch of a family of grieving siblings.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That sounds like it was like a very powerful thing to do, and it sounds like it really brought you guys together during that hard time. And I'm really glad that Auntie Charlotte was there to help support you guys, and I'm sure she really appreciated getting that basket, and especially with the huckleberries in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that was a good selling point.
Yeah, I know she loves her huckleberries. So.
Yeah, well, I will be forever grateful for what she did for us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. And then someone was mentioning that the plants that were gathered again. I know we mentioned it in the film, but can you just retell us like which plants were gathered at the spot in the film?
When we went down to the Costin area and the Ginty's Pond area, I'm sorry, I don't remember our traditional name for that place. That day we gathered both Tuktan, tules, and Quastkine cattails.
Okay.
And we didn't see any Spitzen growing there, or even along the way, but it wasn't the right time to gather the Spitzen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time when it's the right time to gather, it's different than when you sit down and weed. So you have to be prepared, and when the plants are ready, the plants are ready. If you luckily those type of plants, both Tuktan or Tule and the Quastkine, the cattails, they have a larger window of opportunity also because they grow down low and up high. Well, you have a little bit more leeway in terms of gathering at different elevations. And so I know after we gathered and we were talking about internal cell structure of the plants, because I was sharing this also with the children at the school, and we opened up the plants and looked at them. And we noticed there were long cables running through the plants from one end to the other. Literally, you could follow. When you split it, you could follow it from one end all the way to the other end. Because the question we were asking that day was, how do you suppose a cattail, as long and slender as it is, can still stand up so tall? It's just the flattest little plant. And so I said, let's look and see. What's it look like on the outside? And we examined, you could see the little ridges created by those cables running from one end to the other, and little pieces woven in between. So I started to look online and look for any journaled type studies to see if anybody was curious. And it turns out that engineers have been using biomimicry of these plants to create stadium roofs and things like that, because the plants are so strong and the cell structure is so incredibly woven together. And the kids were just like, wow, and people knew this all along.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's cool to like kind of break it down and kind of get back into the Indigenous like science side of things, about the Tule and the Tuktan. Oh, those are the same things. And the, how do you say
Quastkind. It's that
kind
a real hard Q. Quastkind.
And cattail. It's cool to see that that they look so thin, but they're so tall, and they can like last through the wind and whatnot. And like the fact that we use them for mats and sleeping mats and pillows, and also like houses and whatnot, like the teepees that we would make or whatnot, how they would really support us. And like, and it's cool that you got to like do a little bit of research into like how modern day people are using these plants to further enhance that. So that's really cool.
Well, that was one of the things I really wanted the kids to know, is that while these are things that our people have always done, they're not from the past. They connect us to the past. I know I feel really close to my grandma when I'm weaving. She's been gone for many years. And in fact, when you think about connecting to the past, it's also connecting to the future, because when I'm working with the kids and we're weaving, that is our future. So I just really, I know it's definitely become my heart's passion. And I've never been a really loud or rambunctious kind of person. And so that quietness that comes with it, the places that you go to gather are quiet places. The birds are singing, you'll see the squirrels or the critters out on the land, and the appreciation for being on the land, the Timhulau, and all of the gifts and teachings that it has to offer at any given time. So I think the plants are still teaching me to this day, and I'm still learning from them. I had a really nice introduction to a young woman who's also interested. I was at the canoe paddle when the border crossing, and I arrived late. The paddlers had already beached, and I ended up a bit late, and I showed up and I had my cell phone pouch on, and my cell phone in it, and I was sitting down talking with Madeline Gregoire, and she'd asked me what I'd been up to, and I told her, well, I retired, and after I retired, I really dove deep into this, and I've probably woven 100 baskets in the last year, if not more.
Mhm.
And so I shared some of what I made, and another person said, "Did you make your pouch?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "It works pretty good." And I shared it, and she's like, "I have a friend that loves to weave. I'm going to go get her." And she brought her back and introduced us. Her name is Mariel. And we chatted a little bit, and we're actually going to be working on a collaboration, hopefully in the next year or so. And she submitted her grant application, and we'll see what comes from it. I hope that it reaches out further and stands tall like our Kwasakain and our Tekten, and reaches out across the nation, and hopefully regenerates an interest in this type of weaving. I've been really fortunate to attend a few basket weavers conferences where the things I couldn't figure out on my own or through trial and error, I've learned from other weavers. It's a growing community. It's a wonderful and welcoming community. It's a gentle community. It's a loving community. There's a couple of ladies in the Omak area, Tilly Gore and her sister Elaine, who have made it their mission to bring weaving to the communities. And I would like to be a part of that. I would like to be a part of reclaiming those knowledges, to bring that back and firmly root them again in our communities.
Mhm. So that's awesome. I think that's a really good goal and like passion to have. And it already sounds like you're doing it. Like, I mean, even just sharing with us today and like sharing with the schools that you've been volunteering with um, and spreading the knowledge. I think just even sharing the things you make when you go out in community, that's like really powerful. And sharing the baskets with family members and friends, like I think that's really powerful. Um, we had a question that asked, what's the drying time for each material? Like, how long do you have to wait for each material to dry out until you can start using it for weaving?
It depends on what you're working with. For example, starting with say the cattails. The cattails can be seasoned up to a year. Seasoned would be just allowing to stand and dry. When I utilized the cattails for the basket that I made from the materials we gathered that day, they had been in my greenhouse, which I find is a really great place to put them out of the sun, but airy enough for them. They had been in there, I want to say about 2 months, because this was a while ago when you were here. And then I was able to work them at that point. Now that's that material, that the cattail and or the tule. But ideally you would want it to season a little for probably 4 months. In a perfect world, the the pine needles. I've woven with green pine needles as well as dried pine needles. When I started out weaving, I would go and harvest the needles from the tree. And once I moved here to the Ashenola area, and this beautiful tree behind me that lives right here next to me began dropping needles. And I thought, there must be a way to use those. They're so pretty. They have that beautiful tan color. And some of them were a rust color. I learned to distinguish between this year's drop and last year's drop. It changes in color.
Mhm.
And that's when I started experimenting with the dyes. So they were already dried, but the green ones you can weave with. If you do so, you want to make sure that your stitch is very, very tight, because as they dry, they'll shrink.
Mhm.
And as they shrink, they'll get loose. So you have to really pull tight without breaking your needles.
Mhm.
And the cattail cordage, which is made from the wings,
Mhm.
that that can be harvested, and it usually dries within one day.
Mhm.
Once it's dry, you can reconstitute and then begin using it for cordage right away.
Wow.
Uh, I've made speeds, or not speeds, in the Plestkine cordage
Mhm.
in the same day, where I've harvested and I'm pulling the leaves apart.
Mhm.
As I pull apart, I see the wings and I take them at that time and
Mhm.
set them aside and just lay them out. Most of the time, by the time I finish what I'm doing, they're dried out. They're so thin.
Mhm.
But they make really good cordage, and it's a beautiful contrast to the lovely rust color that the Spitzen gives us.
Mhm.
So, as far as the birch, um, the birch that, when the water birch that I've harvested, it can be used right away.
Mhm.
If you're not going to use it, you need to keep it flat. It will curl up on you.
Mhm.
I was visiting a couple of years ago. I was visiting an archaeology site. I used to do a lot of natural resource work, and I worked in archaeology for the local communities. And so I was invited up to a site that was being worked on. My husband and I went, and they said, "Oh, we just got to this one level, and we've got some really interesting things coming up. We found some bark, but we don't know what it is,
Mhm.
and or why it's there. Or it's a pretty good sized piece of bark." And I said, was it under a flat pancake rock? And they said, "How did you know that?" I said, "Well, basket weaving was probably similar then as it is today." And it turns out it was water birch.
Wow.
And it was placed by the weaver under that pancake rock to keep it nice and flat.
Mhm.
And here it was in this archaeology site at a level that would have been radiocarbon dated at around 5 or 6,000 years.
Mhm.
So if that's not reaching into the past all the way to now, the future, I don't know what
Mhm.
is. And that
Yeah.
was our grandmas, our
Yeah.
great great grandmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just some things. This little basket is made from dandelion flower stems.
Wow.
I noticed, not this year, but the year before, for some reason, because we had 3 springs that year and
Mhm.
we had a lot of rain, it was unusual. The dandelions weren't the little squatty dandelions that grow on your lawn. They were tall. Some of them were 2 feet tall.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on there? So I picked some, and I'm looking at them going, why are these guys so tall? And I noticed they're all standing up. And as long as those skinny little stems were, they were
Mhm.
still standing up. It made me think of the quaskai and the cattails. And so I picked some, and they dried out in a couple of days. And I was like, I wonder if I could weave with those. And so I got them wet again. And sure enough, they were strong. And so I got a little basket out of it. I incorporated dandelion flower stems into things. And so I even went online and started looking if anybody else is doing this. And sure enough, there are people out in the world that are using these materials.
Mhm.
And I found that some of the plants that I put in my garden, the leaves from those materials, the stems from those are also being used. When I
Mhm.
started looking up the dandelion flower stems, I came across other things that people are using to weave. And there's a whole world out there who's doing what I'm doing, just really putting their hands on everything that they can.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like I feel like just opening your eyes up to things that you can weave with instead of being like, oh, like I can't weave with something right now or whatnot, but like just being a little bit more open to learning and like trying and trial and error and like just being kind of connecting with yourself to figure out what works. It sounds like it really kind of gets you going in the right direction for some things, and that's really awesome. um we have someone, I know what Spitzen is, but everyone else in the audience doesn't know what Spitzen is. Do you want to share with us what that means?
I'm sorry about that. I forget sometimes. Spitzen is what's known as Indian hemp. Um, it's called dogbane in English. I don't know its Latin name, sorry. I learn plant names and I try to learn them in our language. But if you look it up, that's one of the plants. There's several plants out there that have those extraordinary long fibers that can be harvested. And it's one that Similkameen people have always been known for, is our speets and ropes, our weaving techniques for our cordage and our ropes was so good that it was highly sought after by people all the way to the coast and far beyond our own territory, but into others and other neighboring nations.
Mm-hmm.
Just like our ochre. Our ochre's been found as far southeast so far as eastern Oregon. The southernmost portion of Oregon has been found in archaeological sites there. So it's pretty interesting when you know how far and wide our people traveled and how no matter where they went, they learned to connect to that land and those gifts that it provides to us.
Mm-hmm. The next question we have here is and you can share or not if you don't want to share, that's totally fine. Is what sort of prayers or like intentions you put out when you're harvesting. I know you like we were taught that in our culture and whatnot, but if you want to share one you can, or if you feel like you don't want to, that's totally fine. Even if you want to just share like the intentions behind it, that's good too.
Well, from the way I was taught by my mom and my great grandma, and whenever we're on the land harvesting, we always introduce ourselves when we're harvesting a particular plant. We tell the plant who we are. We tell the plant what we're doing, why we're harvesting, why we're taking from its body, and what we're planning to do with it, and that we will be respectful of it. Just like human beings, everyone, even those living organisms, deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. And those organisms, when you're speaking with them as living beings, that it's being done in a good way, in a respectful way. So that's to start with. And those prayers are just being thankful to Creator for providing these things for us. Also being thankful to our ancestors and the people that loved us into existence. We wouldn't be here if our parents and our great grandparents and our great great grandparents and all those grandmas and grandpas behind us hadn't done what they needed to do to take care of the land and the water and the air and the animals, all the things they can't speak for themselves. If they had not done those things, we wouldn't be here today. And if we don't do those things, they won't be here tomorrow. our children and our grandchildren. So when I'm in a place like we were that day, it's really important to see it taken care of. Even before there was work done there, there was a recent restoration work done in that place with Lower Similkameen, I think the RDOS, the ONA, the Okanagan Nation Alliance staff and crews were involved in doing that restoration work. Even before that, our people looked after, and I had been there to harvest. But how in the world would that place have become so overgrown if our people were allowed to be there? I chose going to that place for a reason that day. And we talked about it on that day. That place used to be part of IR1 for Lower Similkameen Indian Band, and it was one of the cutoff reserves. I feel that that place needs to be looked after by our people. And I'm so happy that the work was done there to make sure it's healthy, to make sure that there's a flow there. I have to acknowledge that recently a dear friend of mine made arrangements at my request to go to another mutual friend home that's locally in Coston, where there were also tulies and cattails growing. And I'm probably the first person in generations, maybe 100 or 125 years, to have had the opportunity as a Native person from this land, from this area, to go and harvest there at what is now a private property. And I had the privilege and honor of going there. And I can tell you that the whole time I was praying and I was thanking Kulin Chutin for that gift, thanking Kulin Chutin for those people that I was with that day, for the wonderful energy that they brought with them, because they too love the land. They too, even though they're not Native in their blood, they're Native in their heart. And they're not just allies, settler allies, people call themselves. I want you to be settler accomplices. I want you to help me do these things. I want you to be willing to be jailed if necessary to protect something. That's how I feel about it. And I was very, very happy and honored to be able to go in there and be in a place that probably hasn't been visited by one of our people for generations. And reawaken the land, reawaken that within the land and ourselves.
Wow. This kind of leads into our next question. We have someone that's a settler that wants to be respectful of the territory and the land, and when they harvest there, so I'm not sure where they're harvesting or whatnot. They just want to be appreciative rather than appropriative of the land and be mindful, and would appreciate some guidance on because they're aware of their love for weaving, which is not rooted in local Indigenous culture, but they're wanting to know some ways to approach it, or like how to navigate that. Just from what I'm hearing, it sounds like maybe connecting with the local Indigenous group to see which would be how to navigate that. What are your thoughts on that?
I would strongly encourage connection with the local community, mainly because as people of and from this land and harvesters that are there year after year, you see places that are being hammered. I'm going to call it hammered. In some cases, because the land has changed so much and those plants are not as abundant as they used to be. And when I say used to be, I want you to close your eyes and imagine the valley bottom just filled with trees and sea bushes and elderberries and Oregon grape berries and all the other fruits and beautiful plants and medicines that our people have relied on. That's our grocery store. And we still use it. I know if you go on my freezer, you're going to find all of those things and more from the valley bottom to the mountain tops. But when you imagine how things used to be, it used to be very abundant and very profuse and everywhere and readily available to anyone. And now those places have shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk because of our need for roads, to build homes, to have all of the things that we need to live in our modern contemporary way. And so connecting with the local community will give you a better idea of where to harvest. Protocol-wise, we also have teachings, and those teachings tell us not to harvest everything. We never take everything. We always only take one part of it. Our teachings tell us who we are and where we come from, whether it's plant, animal, root, or from the water. You know, we're that short little stubby part of this equation. We're only part of a bigger picture. And so if you're going to indigenize yourself to the community and the land, you need to connect with others that have that long-standing knowledge, that intergenerational knowledge. This way, it's sustainable and it's done sustainably. During the film, you notice that we made sure to take the seeds and return those back to that place where we harvested from. That's one means of doing things like that. And also being very selective about what we're harvesting. With things like the cattail, the window for harvesting from the valley bottom to the mountain top can be over a couple of months because of the elevation and the seasonal changes. So if I go and I only harvest in one place and I go there year after year, it never has a chance to recover. It never has a chance for regrowth and to produce to a point where it is providing seed to the land, seed that gets carried by the wind, by the birds, by the other animals that rely on it. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a complex question. So it's, but I think you answered most of it, which was good. And then our last question is, I think it's back with the Spitzen. The person asks, do they have pink flowers and long seeds afterwards for the Spitzen?
They have long seeds. The pods themselves will split open and throw fluffy seed out. And anytime you have an opportunity to spread any type of native seeds, not invasive, but native, I encourage doing so. I know when I harvest, and for example, I just did a batch of elderberries for the juice and to have later in the winter. I did it in such a way that I didn't have to cook the berries, but was able to extract the juice so that I can return the seed to the land. With this fire that we recently had, the land will recover if we give it the chance. But there's nothing wrong with helping it along if you can. And so my plan, because this is something that is close to my heart, is to help the land regenerate. And so I plan to take those seeds and go spread them Well, I'm gardening, and people don't realize this whole landscape is our garden. I've read some old documents, and when those cutoffs, like that place we went and harvested from, happened, that happened because local farmers said, oh, those Indians aren't using that land for anything. They didn't realize that was already our garden, and it had been established for generations. So when we go out on the land and we see things like speeds and those seed pods, if you can spread them and help them along, then yes, do so. If you're harvesting berries and eating them, keep the seeds, take them out and return them to the land. And that's actually part of the protocol anyway. That's the respectful way of harvesting.
Mm-hmm. That was our last question, so I don't know if you have some words to say to end before I end with the little spiel that I usually end with. I'll let you share a few words.
I would truly like to thank you and Cynthia for the beautiful day we had on the land. As a grandmother and as your auntie, I cannot tell you how much of a gift you gave me by agreeing to do the learning on the land. That is the way I was taught, and that's the way I think we should all be taught. When you connect to something, you're connecting to someone else too, not just human, but the organisms and the plants and the animals on the land. And I feel like you both gave me a gift that day. So I would like to say, Leland, I'm very grateful for the time. And I don't know if you noticed, but while I was watching the film, I would just kind of start grinning from ear to ear because I was just, that happiness of that day just completely returned for me, and seeing the smile on your face and it just radiate from you as a person, yeah, I'll carry that with me. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. I just want to say it was an amazing discussion with you, Auntie. Like, you're so wise, and it was great to learn about who taught you how to weave, who was your inspiration, and who your mentees and mentors are, and just some of the locations that are close to your heart for like weaving. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and just sharing everything. It was an amazing discussion, and yeah, I really appreciate it. And lim limped, and so thank you so much for another amazing session. Sorry, I kind of messed up there. We'll be having another learning circle next week. I think we have it posted here. We have the Power of Indigenous Food Sovereignty series. So the first one is going to be dietitian perspectives and stories about the impacts of colonization and on Indigenous health and food systems. So that's on September 21st at 10 a.m. And then we have another one on September 28th, ICEDR, an invitation to connect, gather, and exchange on Indigenous terms. And feel free to sign up for our learning circle at www.learningscircle.ubc.ca. And we look forward to seeing you at our next one. Lim limped, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.